Top of the week to you. Happy Monday, everybody. How are you doing? My name is Deanna, and I'm streaming out of Humboldt County, about Humboldt County, to Humboldt County, and anyone else who cares. And we are going through our study, the 5,000 year leap. Let's see, destination. My Rumble doesn't want to work. Oh, come on. Come on, come on. I just set it up. I just set it up so that it would work. But it's not working. Oh, poo-poo. Why wouldn't you work? Why wouldn't you work? Maybe it'll catch up. I mean, I just had to set it up. I realized I last minute didn't. That'll be a bummer if it's not on Rumble because some of these get taken off of YouTube. I just got back on the Facebook, which is probably dumb. I should probably delete that Facebook account. We know it's just a data bank going to be used and held against us later, don't we? Everybody's probably watching all the latest buzz, all the latest stuff. But we are going to hunker down and study and learn because those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. Didn't we hear that all our life? I've heard that all my life. So I'll talk to myself. Self said yourself, you know your Rumble's not working. I know, but I set it up. It's okay. I can do this. I'm actually quite good at talking to myself. No problemo. I'll share my screen. I got everything uploaded for us here. Unfortunately, let's see if my Rumble's going to catch up with itself. It's not looking like it wants to. I had to set it up for future time. Maybe it'll pick up at that time. Who knows? I don't know what's going on with it. I had to last minute set it up, though, so that's okay. That's okay. We'll just do this here. So today's lesson is on peace with all nations, entangling alliances with none. But we're going to answer the questions from last lesson, which was about peace through strength. And this is our first question. What does prosperity usually attract? Predators. 2, how much defense did the founders feel was necessary? Enough to discourage attacks. 3, the founders believed national defense had 2 essential components. Name them. Not just military, but also virtue. Virtue. Franklin and Washington said the best way to preserve peace was to be prepared for war. Six, from 1945 to 1980, the U.S. had followed the philosophy of mutually assured destruction. You're going to try to kill me? Well, I'm going to kill you. 7, Reagan attempted to implement a defense program of mutually assured. Didn't I write that word down? SDI initiative. Strategic Defense Initiative, which was basically satellites. He proposed the idea of killing things rather than killing people. And that was when Star Wars came into play. Sam Adams felt because freedom is given by God, man cannot give it away. Write the 24th principle of liberty. We always shorten it as peace through strength, but the full principle is a free people will not survive unless they stay strong. And some of the notes I have here is, did I skip number 5? Franklin warned, make yourself sheep and the wolves will eat you. Strength helps to make friends of our enemies. Security lies in our strength, in numbers and wealth. This principle was set up for when they thought about other nations looking at us, they being the founders, it was thought that we must appear strong so they don't mess with us like a bully. Most of the time, bullies don't pick on people that are their own size in stature, right? It's usually weaker ones. We wanted to be treated, they wanted us to be treated with justice and kindness, and have America thought of, if we're strong enough, we can't beat them. We'll be left alone. And no one knew any better what a weak defense was than George Washington. Nobody knew the necessity of a strong defense better than George Washington. So that is the quiz answers. And now I'm going to read to you. This was one of my favorite chapters. I learned a lot in this chapter. The last time I read and studied through this about our first 100 years in America, we did not put boots on the ground in other countries. If we knew other countries were being seized out and starving, our philosophy was, and our stance was, to help the people get food. That was it. So we'll learn about that right here. Peace, commerce, and honest friendships with all nations, entangling alliances with none. Let me see if my Rumble didn't kick on. It's supposed to come on at 10:45, so maybe it will come on at 10:45. But I don't know. I'm not really sure. The StreamYard said we're having trouble with it, so I don't know if it's going to work or not on Rumble. I do apologize if it didn't. I'm not much of one to edit. Rumble takes a long time to upload too, but it's possible that I could do that. Okay. These are the words of Thomas Jefferson given in his first inaugural address. Peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. As the United States emerged on the world scene in the 18th century, American leaders took a united and fixed position against entangling alliances with any foreign powers unless an attack against the United States made such alliances temporarily necessary. This was the founders' doctrine of separatism. This was far different from the modern term of isolationism. The latter term implies a complete seclusion from other nations, as though the United States were to be detached and somehow incubated in isolation from other nations. In point of fact, the policy of the founders was just the opposite. They desired to cultivate a wholesome relationship with all nations, but they wished to remain aloof from sectional quarrels and international disputes. They wanted to avoid alliances of friendship with one nation, which would make them enemies of another nation in time of crisis. They wanted to keep American markets open to all countries unless certain countries engaged in hostilities toward the United States. What is going on here? Why is that line going across? That's so weird. Switzerland followed the founders' policy. The founders' original policy was similar in many ways to that of modern Switzerland, which has successfully remained neutral and aloof from entangling alliances during 2 world wars and numerous European quarrels. During these periods of intense military action, Switzerland did not follow a policy of isolationism, but one of universal diplomatic relations with all who might wish to come to Switzerland to buy, sell, borrow, or bank. She took a hostile posture toward none unless threatened. In general terms, this is analogous to the doctrine of separatism practiced by the early American leaders. Washington describes the founders' plan. The universality of foreign relations, which Washington hoped to engender, is reflected by the following statement from his famous farewell address. Observe good faith and justice toward all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. Religion and morality enjoin this conduct, and can it be that good policy does not equally enjoin it? It will be worthy of a free, enlightened, and at no distant period a great nation to give to mankind the magnanimous and too novel example of a people always guided by an exalted justice and benevolence. From experience, Washington was well aware of the natural tendency to classify nations as friends or enemies. He felt that in the absence of political, military, or commercial hostility toward the United States, every effort should be made to cultivate friendship with all. He wrote, in the execution of such a plan, nothing is more essential than that permanent, inveterate antipathies against particular nations and passionate attachments for others should be excluded, and that in place of them, just and amicable feelings toward all should be cultivated. The nation which indulges toward another in habitual hatred or in habitual fondness is, in some degree, a slave. It is a slave to its animosity or to its affection, either of which is sufficient to lead it astray from its duty and interest. Washington pointed out that antagonism by one nation against another disposes each more readily to offer insult and injury, to lay hold of slight causes of umbrage, and to be haughty and intractable when accidental or trifling oppositions of dispute occur. The problem with playing favorites. By the same token, the United States could become overly attached to some nations because the people feel a special kinship or affection toward them, Washington warned. So, likewise, a passionate attachment of one nation for another produces a variety of evils. Sympathy for the favorite nation, facilitating the illusion of an imaginary common interest in cases where no real common interest exists, and infusing into one the enmities of the other, betrays the former into a participation in the quarrels and wars of the latter without adequate inducement or justification. It leads also to concessions to the favorite nation of privileges denied to others, which is apt doubly to injure the nation making the concessions by unnecessarily parting with what ought to have been retained, and by exciting jealousy, ill will, and disposition to the retaliate in the parties from whom equal privileges are withheld. Concerning most favored nations, Washington also warned that giving a more favored status to particular nations could open up the United States to strong foreign influences, which could subvert the security or best interests of the United States. In fact, American officials seeking to accommodate friendly allies could inadvertently compromise American interests to a very dangerous extent. Washington said, against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of republican government. But that jealousy, to be useful, must be impartial, else it becomes the instrument of the very influence to be avoided instead of a defense against it. Excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another cause those whom they actuate to see danger only on one side and serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on the others. Real patriots who may resist the intrigues of the favorite are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interests. What American foreign policy should be. Washington then made his famous declaration of the founders' policy of foreign relations. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible. So far as we have already formed engagements, let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Here, let us stop. Even within the previous few years, Washington had seen the tendency to get the United States embroiled in European disputes, and when he saw them operating to the distinct disadvantage of the United States, therefore he warned, Europe has a set of primary interests which to us have none, or a very remote relation. Hence, she must be engaged in frequent controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary combinations and collisions of her friendships or enmities. Why? By interweaving our destiny with that of any part of Europe, entangle our peace and prosperities in the toils of European ambition, rivalship, interest, humor, or caprice. A world policy. And what he had said concerning Europe, he would say to the rest of the world. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. So far, I mean, as we are now at liberty to do it, for let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing engagements. I hold the maxim no less applicable to public than to private affairs, then honesty is always the best policy. I repeat, therefore, let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense. But in my opinion, it is unnecessary and would be unwise to extend them. He said that temporary alliances may be justified for extraordinary emergencies. But other than that, harmony, liberal intercourse with all nations are recommended by policy, humanity, and interest. Commercial relations with other nations. Washington felt the same policy should apply to America's commercial relations with foreign countries. But even our commercial policy should hold an equal and impartial hand, neither seeking nor granting exclusive favors or preferences, consulting the natural course of things, diffusing and diversifying by gentle means the streams of commerce, but forcing nothing, establishing with powers so disposed in order to give to trade a stable course, to define the rights of our merchants, and to enable the government to support them. Conventional rules of intercourse, the best that present circumstances and mutual opinion will permit, but temporary and liable to be from time to time abandoned or varied as experience and circumstances shall dictate. Washington was not in favor of the United States government begging for special privileges, monopolies, or advantages from other nations in commercial treaties. He said, it is folly in one nation to look for disinterested favors from another, that it must pay with a portion of its independence for whatever it may accept under that character, that by such acceptance it may place itself in the condition of having given equivalents for nominal favors, and yet of being reproached with ingratitude for not giving more. There can be no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. It is an illusion which experience must cure, which a just pride ought to discard. Long after Washington was dead, Jefferson reiterated these same basic principles in a letter to James Monroe dated October 24th, 1823. Our first and fundamental maxim should be never to entangle ourselves in the broils of Europe. Our second, never to suffer Europe to intermeddle with cisatlantic Western Hemisphere affairs. America, North and South, has a set of interests distinct from those of Europe and peculiarly her own. She should therefore have a system of her own, separate and apart from that of Europe. While the last, Europe, is laboring to become the domicile of despotism, our endeavors should surely be to make our hemisphere that of freedom. The founders' effort to reconcile separatism with manifest destiny. American separatism did have one aspect which was clearly distinct from Swiss neutrality. The founders accepted the doctrine of manifest destiny. This placed upon the American people the responsibility of serving as the vanguard nation for the moral and political emancipation of all mankind. Freedom, education, and progress for all men were a common denominator of the thinking of early American leaders. As John Adams wrote, I always considered the settlement of America with reverence and wonder as the opening of a grand scene and design in Providence for the illumination of the ignorant and the emancipation of the slavish part of mankind all over the earth. In the same spirit, James Madison wrote, happily for America, happily we trust for the whole human race, they, the founders, pursued a new and more noble course. The Monroe Doctrine was specifically designed to insulate the Western Hemisphere from further contamination by quarreling European monarchs. The founders hoped Mexico and each of the Latin American countries would gradually follow the example of the United States in becoming free, self-governing people. Once the spirit of freedom had encompassed North, Central, and South America, they hoped it would do just as James Madison said, spread abroad until it had become the heritage of the whole human race. Separatism replaced by internationalism. Separatism and pursuing a manifest destiny to encourage the emancipation of the whole human race was the official policy of the United States for the first 125 years of its history. Nevertheless, there were powerful influences congregating in the United States, particularly in financial circles, which wanted America in the thick of things worldwide. Their opportunity came with the eruption of World War I. Congressional investigations by the Reese Committee revealed that long before the Lusitania sinking, these influences were agitating for U.S. involvement. Although the United States narrowly avoided becoming a member of the League of Nations after World War I, the stage was set for an accelerated involvement of the United States, both economically and politically, in foreign quarrels. Congressman Charles Lindbergh counts American internationalism a serious mistake. After World War I, Congressman Charles A. Lindbergh, Sr., father of the famous Lone Eagle, who was the first to fly the Atlantic, asked the people of the United States to reconsider the policy Washington was pursuing in its foreign affairs. He was particularly concerned about how Americans were pushed into World War I. In 1923, he wrote, "Take, for example, our entry into World War I in 1917. We did not think. We elected a president for a second term because he said he kept us out of war in his first term. We proved by a large vote that we did not want to go to war, but no sooner was the president reelected than the propaganda started to put us to war. Then we became hysterical, as people have always done in war, and we believed everything bad against our enemy and believed only good of our allies and ourselves. As a matter of fact, all the leaders were bad, vicious. They lost their reason, and the people followed. We cannot properly blame the people of any of the European nations unless we blame ourselves. None of them were free from danger of the others. We, however, were not in danger. Statements by profiteers and militarists to the contrary notwithstanding. The greatest good we could do the world at that time was to stay out, and that would have been infinitely better for ourselves, for we could have helped the world had we conserved our resources. There was never a nation that did a more unstatesmanlike thing than we did to enter the war. We came out without establishing a single principle for which we entered. The one compelling duty of America is to put its own house in shape and to stand upon an economic system that will make its natural resources available to the intelligence, industry, and use of the people. When we do that, the way to world redemption from the folly of present chaos will stand out in our country so clearly, honestly, and usefully that we shall be copied wherever peoples do their own thinking. Visualizing America as a world peacemaker. As World War II broke out in Europe during September 1939, there was widespread hope among Americans that the United States could somehow resist the temptation to become involved. Highly perceptive leaders who had served in Washington and knew the tragic consequences of internationalism as a basic foreign policy, raised warning voices against participation in another world war. One of these was a former Undersecretary of State and former ambassador to Mexico. As a prominent writer on constitutional issues, he consistently reflected the views of the founders. In 1939, he gave a speech urging Americans leaders to recognize the role of America as a great world peacemaker. Said he, "America, multi-raced and multi-nationed, is by tradition, by geography, by citizenry, by neutral sympathy, and by material interest, the great neutral nation of the earth. God so designed it. Drawn from all races, creeds, and nations, our sympathies run to every oppressed people. Our feelings engaged on opposite sides of great differences will, in their natural course, if held in due and proper restraint, neutralize the one with the other. Directed in right channels, this great body of feeling for the one side or the other will ripen into sympathy and love for all misguided and misled fellow men who suffer in any cause. And this sympathy and love will run out to all humanity in its woes. One of the great tragedies of the war, World War II, now starting, is that every people now engaged in it have been led into it without their fully knowing just where they are bound. The people themselves are largely innocent of this slaughter. As the great neutral of the earth, America may play a far greater part in this war. It is our solemn duty to play a better part than we can do by participating in the butchery. Having in mind our position as the great world neutral, and remembering that the people of these warring nations have been led into this conflict largely unwittingly and therefore are largely blameless, we should announce our unalterable opposition to any plan to starve these innocent peoples involved in this conflict, the women, the children, the sick, the aged, and the infirm, and declare that when actual and bona fide mass starvation shall come to any of them, no matter who they are, we shall do all that we properly may do to see that they are furnished with food. If we shall rebuild our lost moral power and influence by measures such as these, which will demonstrate our love for humanity, our justice, our fair-mindedness, we shall then be where we can offer mediation between the two belligerents. America, the great neutral, will thus become the peacemaker of the world, which is her manifest destiny if she lives the law of peace. A new role for America. Since the former Undersecretary of State, J. Reuben Clark Jr., gave this speech, the United States has been involved in 3 major wars, including the Holocaust of World War II. Looking back, one cannot help wondering how much happier, more peaceful, and more prosperous the world would be if the United States had been following a policy of separatism as the world's great peacemaker instead of internationalism as the world's great policeman. And that is y'all chapter, what is it? Principle 25. Peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. I don't think my Rumble took today, which is a shame because I have more people that actually watch on Rumble than on YouTube anymore, because people know I end up deleting a lot of my YouTube videos. Of course, more people watch the chit chats than this course, which is fine. I just have grown weary of hearing myself talk. There's so many other people that talk a better talk. And sometimes I don't even want to hear my own self-talk. But for those of you rewatching, I pray that the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you, be gracious unto you, and give you peace. May no weapon formed against you stand. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. I will see you on the next one.